One's ready. One's ready. Go!
Hey everybody, before we hop into this next episode with Major Chris Walsh, yeah, I got the rank wrong in the beginning. He is a Lieutenant Colonel Select or promotable, but he is not wearing it yet. But before we hop into that, please go over to 18alphafitness.com. That's 18afitness.com. Check out some of the programs that Coach Edge is putting together for you. He's tailor making them for you, all so that you can be ready, and not just be ready for Air Force Special Warfare, BUDS, Ranger, Special Forces Assessment and Selection, but just getting ready for life in general. Head over there, use the promo code #1 and ready, get yourself a discount. He'll get you squared away with where you need to be, where you want to be, how much time you have, and what your goals are, and you'll be squared away. But for now, enjoy this episode with the Special Tactics Training Squadron Commander and kind of the changes that they're going through right now. Later. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the One's Ready podcast. You're in the team room again. It's Aaron, Trent, and then we have a returning guest, Lieutenant Colonel Chris Walsh. Thanks for joining us, sir.
Hey, it's good to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the folks that don't know, your background and where you're currently sitting and what the kind of things you're getting after now, why don't you give us a quick recap before we get into the kind of meat and potatoes of what we were going to talk about?
Yeah. So I guess way back when, I joined the Air Force in 2009. Started out as an aircraft maintenance officer, cross-trained in 2000. I got selected in 2010. Air Force things took a while. Really made it over in 2012, and then did my first assignment with ST out of Washington in 2014. I think I got there. I was at the 2-2 for a pretty good amount of time. Went from there to North Carolina and then from there now, quick stint in the WCAP program. We can dig into that or not, I don't care. And then from there, my next ST deal was is where I sit now, is the squadron commander of the Special Tactics Training Squadron, which, as we will discuss, is going through a bit of a renovation, I guess is a good way to put it, and just in a reimagination, and I think in a positive way, but we'll get into that one.
Yeah, well, I think reimagination is probably a good way to put it, because people have got change fatigue and all that kind of good stuff now at this point. So reimagining is a nice word to say. So what? Actually, you just brought it up. You said WCAP, right? What? Just touch on that real quick, because it's a program that I don't think a lot of people, even active duty, know about.
Yeah, I think there were a total of 5 active duty members in it when I was in it, so it's very, very small. But it's called the World Class Athlete Program, and so it's reserved for folks that have an athletic capability at an potentially Olympic level. It doesn't necessarily mean you'll make the Olympics. I didn't, but nonetheless, I went to the Olympic trials and did the whole thing with the U.S. bobsled team. So we had 2 bobsledders. Another guy, Dakota, he's gotten out. He was a U-28 driver. So awesome guy. Loved hanging out with him. Loved making fun of the U-28 community as well. That was a good time. And then, Navy SEALs.
Is it true that they're in fact the SEALs of the sky? Is that
So here's a great story about this. Here's probably one of my favorite stories, actually. So, I do the racing stuff on the side too. And when I was working with one of these teams, one of the team managers is an ex-Delta operator. He was at Gothic Serpent. He was a Ranger, awesome dude. Ended up getting a Silver Star from Mogadishu later down the road. And anyways, so I was talking about bobsled and how this guy Dakota was a U-28 driver, and without even having to prompt it, he was like, "Oh yeah, it's the SEALs of the sky." So it was that prevalent of a story that is out there amongst everybody. That was from the community.
I will say the absolute funniest story I ever heard. This is a not recent history, so earlier, a couple years ago, in somewhere in Africa, and one of the teams, to his credit, one of their chief petty officers, one of their master chiefs, it was hilarious. We were talking about stuff. I was like, yeah, we're doing support for this mission that's going on with the U-28s, and he goes, oh yeah, our team is actually the U-28 guys of the ground. And I thought that was absolutely hilarious. He was like, yeah, they basically call us the U-28s of the ground. I was like, what?
That's pretty good.
For a SEAL guy to say, I was like, okay, that's pretty funny.
That's a good
Yeah, I wonder
bridge.
where all that originated from. I'm sure that somebody was basically trying to say what they do, like, hey, in a couple words, describe what you do. And they're just,
Yeah.
so, all
Absolutely
right.
was a misspeak that
Yeah.
just got,
And it,
it's like anything. It got taken away and probably way out
Yeah.
of context at this point, but
yeah, very, very familiar with that, getting taken out of context and saying something stupid, and it just kind of gets perpetuated
yeah.
continuously.
I
Um,
love it.
yeah. So, try not to cough. Hey, Chris, so you are the current STTS or Special Tactics Training Squadron Commander. I think you're actually going on your third year now, right?
I'm in my third year. Yeah.
You're in
So
your third year,
yeah.
which is unusual within the Air Force. I mean, it does happen, so it's not like it's some crazy wazoo thing that you're in your third year, but it doesn't happen that often. So, what are some of the things that you guys are working on now that we want to highlight?
Yeah. So, sorry, I don't know if my camera's going a little wild there.
Yeah.
Yeah, interference. But yeah. So I took a third year because of the things we're working on, right? Because one of the things, this is going to be a bit of a sidebar for a quick second. One of the things I don't like about the way we do change of commands and the rate at which we do change of commands in the Air Force is it can be very disruptive in times of change. There are times where it's appropriate. You're like, hey, some people do need to move on, right? And I think maybe that's the case for me. I don't know, but I like to think we were doing a decent job. So I wanted to stay as long as I could. It worked out for my personal situation too, but I wanted to stay as long as I could to kind of see things and actualize them, right? And have this ground truth about how this thing has evolved from where it came up with inception, which I'll get into, and then where it is going. And so, and being able to kind of walk the dog on that as you're having these conversations with 06s and general officers about where you're trying to take this this training infrastructure, I think is really important because that context over a long period of time, just like we develop partners downrange, like that is done through years of engagement. That context is really important. So for me, I was like, hey, I want to see this happen and make sure the folks of the squadron are taken care of, and that the community is taken care of in the right way, and that this is not going to fall flat on its face entirely. Every good plan sounds good until you do it. But so the original kind of inception of why we started looking at, hey, why is STTS still doing this year-long course, and why are we training the way that we're training, really came down to a very simple thing. I had a number of young airmen that were coming through training that had gotten to the squadron and were ending enlistments, like 4-year contracts, finishing at STTS, and I was like, oh, that's very strange, abnormal. It happened in the past where people would get out after STTS, but it was like, pretty rare. And I'm on I think six guys now, which doesn't sound like a big number, but in our communities, that's six matters. You put six guys in a squadron, they're like, oh wow, look at us.
It's like 3% of the career field.
Yeah, I know. So that was the thing that was kind of a red flag. And so we started to say, okay, why is this happening? And we dig into it. There's a number of things happening on the ATC side of the pipeline, and in school scheduling and COVID. There's a number of factors that played into pipelines taking 4 years. One of the years of those 4 years is STTS, right? And so I was like, okay, well, we're not immune to being a part of this problem. And so again, if we were to rewind another decade before that, or 2 decades, I guess, STTS was created because we were developing individual operators to go out and augment special operations forces across the Army, Navy, and Marine Corps, which required them to be individually talented and skilled, not really team-based like we are driving towards today. And so I said, okay, maybe there's something there. Also, I think we've lost connectivity with our NCO Corps training our airmen while they're in their younger stages of their career, right? Like they show up at 5 level and then you're kind of like, oh, you should know everything. And in reality, we all know that they're showing up as like a 3 level plus at best, and you really still need to do the over the shoulder thing. So I think getting back to kind of the roots of the way military training and OJT training worked, or on the job training, for those that aren't familiar with that term, there was some goodness in getting into looking at a different way of doing training. So what that got us to was, okay, can we shorten STTS and push some of the training that is kind of common to pre-deployment stuff, tactics, shooting, some of the things that are just, I know you're going to do it more than once at the training squadrons, or at the operational squadrons, and then retain really the skill level upgrade stuff that's a bit harder to do on a big scale at a team, right? So that was kind of the initial concept. We came up with a 6-month course, and we were going to PCS, which is happening now. PCS students, as soon as they finish their initial skills training, straight to their operational units, which in that moment has cut off a year of the pipeline, right? So, I think that's a moral victory. And there's also, like, from a recruiting and retention perspective, potentially, like, okay, pipeline isn't 4 years anymore. It isn't 3 years. And so there's this realistic thing that I'm going to get to teams sooner. A lot of the other soft forces do this way, in terms of do their training as they go through their careers. The Army is very big on that. Like, you kind of earn your way to advanced courses and stuff. But regardless, not trying to copy and paste other people's plans, but I was like, hey, there's obviously something that works there because they've done that. So that was kind of where it all started. I'll pause there in case we want to dig into any of that.
No, I just want to make a point of clarity, right? Because we talk about the pipeline a lot, and a lot of the questions we get are on the process of how it works. So when SR and CCT guys graduate from Pope, they go to a 2 series unit first, and then it's on that unit to send them TDY back to STTS to fulfill and this is like a thing that we talked about for a long time, is it's not their 5-level upgrade training, but their STTS training before they go back to their unit and finish out. Is that correct?
Yeah. So another way to think about it is, TDY won't be for everybody, right? 2-3, pretty easy kill for them.
Right.
Just drive across the base, show up to work, we'll take care of you. It will be TDY for others. And so we did everything we could to, like, hey, we have dorm space to be able to house folks TDY, like ways to make it cheap for the squadrons, because I recognize that would be an issue. But they're only going to do a portion of that upgrade process with us. And then really the rest of it is being grown up in the team rooms with the NCOs and the senior NCOs that have that experience as well. And then are teaching them the things that the squadron is wanting to do. And then hopefully there's a standardization of training, which we'll get into in a second, which is kind of the next, I guess, evolution of where this went, kind of outside of our, initial design. But that's where this ultimately, we kind of opened Pandora's box, I guess, a bit, and said, oh, we can do something different. And so then everyone's like, okay, we can do something different. So what would that look like?
Sir, I'm just sitting here wondering, how many spears are you getting thrown your way? I love the initiatives, right? But like, you're the STTS commander and you're kind of like changing everything, or like you have all these great ideas, right? And I get it. You're like at the point of the nexus point in between all these things. So like you have a really good vantage point of how all this is working. But I have to assume, change is hard. And especially when you're talking to the 2 series units, man, how much communication is this taking on your part to try to change the culture as we move forward here? It's just one of the things I was thinking. Sorry.
No, that's a great question, and really was the biggest learning point of this whole thing, in a good way. Like, I expected it to be an emotional experience, right? Anything on this scale is going to be emotional. It wasn't, I wasn't saying, hey, how can I change all of ST, or how can the squadron do that? That was not the going in thing. But at the same time, I was like, there is a problem here. And I could do what a lot of other commanders have done. I'm not saying this is all me. I don't want to take credit. But the squadron could have done what the squadron has done a number of times in the past and just said, hey, we'll run the status quo. Someone else will figure that out in the 2040 vision or whatever vision number we're on right now. So, but I was like, hey, we could actually come up with a solution here and enact it. I'll acknowledge it could be bad. I've taken things and said, hey, that was not the best option. And we've changed directions a little bit from feedback. I think that's how this whole thing is supposed to work. So I'm not immune to saying, hey, I might not be right on the cue with this, but yeah, there was a number of spears, right? And because it did start to touch everything, and everyone's like, initially like, oh, okay, they don't really pay attention until it starts happening. And then everyone's like, oh, wait, what's going on? I was like, well, we have been socializing this for a year. Like, hey, what do you think about this idea? We're driving to this end state. And so we invited everybody into the conversation. That was important to me to say, hey, this is an everybody problem. Everyone needs to be paying attention. Everyone's busy too. And so they kind of pay attention. And then I would argue that it didn't quite get the attention it needed until it was like, oh, people are actually showing up. 3 of them are showing up to the squadrons now. Oh my God. Like, what do we do? And I was like, you train them. That's what we've always done. OT&E, like that's the thing we do. And so I think it was just a shock to the system in a lot of ways. And what this may look like in my tenure and what it may look like in 3 years may be a bit different. But I think one of the big things is like, it did start the conversation. It did get us moving in a new direction. And hopefully I think for the better, but time will tell on that one, right? So it's easy to be like, oh, this is the dumbest thing that's ever happened, and I was like, okay, that'll fall on me, I guess. But yeah, I think it was important to move forward.
I think there's something to that as well. When you're a brand new 3 level, to go to a 2 series unit and then to meet like your supervisor and all the guys on team, and then when you go back to STTS, like you feel like a sense of responsibility, right? You're not just a student in the pipeline anymore. You're not just an individual. Like you have that responsibility to represent, the 2-1, the 2-2, or the 2-3, or whatever it is, as you go back, right? You have a supervisor now that's going to be very upset if they get an email from STTS saying, "Hey, this guy's not meeting the standards and he's jacking things up." And have you guys seen that,
like,
type of thing?
This is
Right.
a course now, right? You got to finish it. It's not like hey, get through and we're gonna sign you off. It's like, no. I think the other thing we gain is something to your point is, hey, the expectations go up for the operators, and you have to come to the course, and the course is designed to expect you to perform and pass the material, and we still have that right now. I wouldn't say that's like completely outside of the thing, but the vibe is a bit different when you're on a TDY thing. I also think it's good because you get some relevance, like, what is this thing I've been doing for 2 years? What does this really mean? You come to STTS where you're still kind of in this, like, you're not a cone. We try not to go there, but you still kind of feel that way, right? And it's like, hey, go be a new guy, not a cone. A little different, but you still kind of got your big boy pants on. And then come back to the squadron, come back to training world and get in touch with the training world and get back into that a bit, and then go back. And so again, like, if we just kind of talk about human learning and how you kind of gain skills, you don't gain skills by just, like, a doctor doesn't just front load all their stuff. And it's like, okay, now you know how to do brain surgery. Like, it just takes time to go back and forth between learning and doing and learning and doing. And we've had such a front loaded model for so long. I think that it has atrophied long-term skills, especially as we've gotten away from getting to operationalize and tactically employ those skills as much as we did in Iraq and Afghanistan, right? So guys aren't getting those reps anymore. So we need to have a bit more of an in and out formal process in my head. And so I think there's something there that we won't really realize the benefits of it for a while, but I think that works. So.
Yeah, in the hot and heavy of GWOT, things were just completely different. And man, I give you your kudos, like, to everybody that's listening, like, to be able to stand up and say, hey, this isn't the scenario anymore. When you were a 5 level getting out of STTS in 2008 to 2015, everybody in the pipeline was like, no, tight, like, you may be a little bit weak on these skills. That's okay. You're going to have 2 deployments by this time 2 years from now. So you're going to have those reps. You're going to have that experience. And we kind of depended upon the deployment cycle in order to season those guys. So to look at everybody and go, hey, that's not what's going on anymore. So we need to find, just like you said, hey, there's a problem. I can identify the problem, and I understand why that causes, change fatigue and emotional responses and stuff. Because then people wrap that up into, a little bit of, this is the way that we've always done things. But, people often, talk about history and legacy, and they wrap all of these other things into it. So, kudos to you for driving forward on that. I know it's not an easy thing to do. When we talk about those skills where you identify a problem set and you say, hey, these are the skills that we're going to probably need going into the future, that's where a lot of the rubber doesn't meet the road for rank and file folks, right? Like, they don't see the vision of, what does the next generation of ST look like? What does the next generation of warfare look like? What are some of those skills that you guys have woven into STTS that are, that people can look forward to, essentially, for all of these dudes in the pipeline that are listening, people that want to get in the combat control career field? What are some of these things that you're thinking, SR and STO as well? What are you thinking about the skill set, the suite of problems that you're teaching them to fix at STTS, and how is that different from what it was before?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, the face of warfare is changing, and to be honest, we don't know. Like, if anyone's going to sit up here and stand and say, "I got the vision, and this is what it's going to look like," they're lying to you. They have an idea.
The chicken bones.
It's a guess, right? Like, this is an educated guess. We have some examples of seeing what warfare looks like in the Ukraine. We study our enemies pretty hard. They study us as well, right? And so, if we've always done what we've always done, they're smart. The enemy's smart. So we can't stay static and expect to have a preordained success on the battlefield, that we're just going to be like, hey, what we've done is always going to work. We know that's not the case. And so there's just new emerging things that we have to start to explore. Do I have all of the answers of what those skills need to look like? No, but that's what the conversations we're having. And really, what the other thing that this has done is it's bought us white space, right? To say, okay, we're not just going to invest entirely in the legacy model forever. We do have to do legacy things because there are things that just make us who we are as ST that we bring that are unique capabilities. We can't ignore that either, right? That's an important thing, I think. As we talk, like some of the aspect war stuff, it can get kind of diluted into, oh, we need another soft team doing soft things. I was like, we need an Air Force team doing Air Force things in an Air Force manner, right? And so, again, a whole different topic. I'm sure you talked to, I didn't listen to Jimmy's episode yet, but I'm sure he's got the bubble on that pretty well. And so what I've got is white space, and it's like, hey, what skills do we need, and what do we need to be doing, right? So if it's counter UAS, if it's UAS stuff that we need to invest more heavily in, if it's more distributed C2 things that we need to invest more heavily in, then we can start really digging into creating expertise at a schoolhouse to teach that. Because right now it's a lot of like, hey, we're going off the shelf for training, or we're going to other schools from other places. And it's like, if this is the thing that we are going to hang our hat on and we're going to be exquisitely good at, we probably also need the training backbone to make that a reality. And so that SOCOM looks at us and says, hey, this is something that they do. And they've got all the things that build that operator that can do that thing and have this effect on the battlefield. And so that is another benefit. We aren't quite there yet, but that is kind of what that starts to pave the way for. Of what those can look like. So those skills are kind of what I just mentioned is, yeah, the UAS thing is a hot topic. What does that look like? You know, it is so rapidly evolving. I mean, we can't dig into most of what's going on there on a podcast, but it is just so rapidly evolving on what's going on downrange that we've got to figure out what does our piece of that look like. And then it's such a disruptive comms environment out there. It's like, how do you communicate and how do you bring effects, strike effects on the battlefield or whatever that could be, right? Kinetic or non-kinetic. And so those things are very like nascent terms. Like those are very like, it doesn't really, a guy it's sitting out there like, hey, I want to join ST. What does that mean? It's hard because some of it is like, it's just behind so many little layers of security. I can't really dig into some of the things. But what I think is exciting when I look at all that is like, there is an actual need for Air Force teams to go do Air Force things. It's not individuals anymore. Is that going to be direct action stuff like we've seen? I don't know right now. Like obviously in a phase 0 type war where we're at right now is where we're preparing for potential conflict. Probably not a whole lot of like shooting of things and guys going out and doing that stuff. And some of that's exciting, and there are people that find that exciting, but we have to be prepared to do that. And so, yeah, we're in a bit of like in between. I would argue that anyone that's looking at SOF and they're looking at ST, like everywhere is in this same space, right? Like SEALs are dealing with the same stuff. Army GBs are dealing with the same stuff. Like, how do you stay relevant in a phase 0 situation? And that is building partners and building capability for the future conflict or what you think is right. And then just kind of going through iterations of going and deploying and testing it and coming back. And so that takes time, and I don't have all the answers. And that I think I talked around a bit of it, but that's what I got right now. So.
Right. I'll say it for Trent and for the SR guys. Yes, you're going to learn about gravitic propulsion drone systems. That's what you're going to be working with. So, and you can totally say that on a podcast. It turns out it's pretty popular if you do that. So no big deal. I want to focus on the team thing because it's important, right? The questions that we still get, every single day is, hey, I want to be a combat controller and I want to do nothing but go support the Army and the Navy, and I want to be a JTAC and I want to drop bombs. And we try to tell people, hey, we're looking forward to this future fight and we're working with the teams. How do you, when you look at a perfect ST team, like you can snap your fingers, king for a day, and you have an Air Force team that is handling Air Force problems, how do combat controllers and special reconnaissance fit into that team? And are there any other skills that we're giving to combat controllers and SR to be a holistic team?
Yeah, that's great. And really, this is one of the things I actually like about the aspect war concept and the concept side of it. I've read through the pad a couple times, but the concept of like, hey, having a team with individualized skills that are kind of mirrored on either side of the team, I think is an important thing. Like that could be combat controllers. I think the number out there was 4. I think that's one of these things, like we got to do it and see what happens before I can say, yes, 4 is the right number of controllers, 2 is the right number of SR. I think it's more about like talent and everything. So you can generally train people to do advanced skills from any AFSC, right? I don't need a certain beret color to say, hey, I need you to go learn this thing that you didn't learn in the pipeline. And so and we need the J's on the team too. Like what would a medical capability on a team look like if we didn't have PJs, and lean into that. And that rescue aspect of it is important too, right? So
it'd be about the same medical wise without them.
It'd be exactly the same. You just have to deal with a lot less condescension and narcissism is really what you would get rid of there.
But again, I'm not, because we don't own the J world as much. Where that is evolving and what their future medical situation looks like, I'm imagining is under review as well. And they're probably looking at, hey, what else is out there that we can be specialists at? And that's even a thing, is like, hey, they're smart guys, for the most part. We all are generally. And so we pick good people. You bring them in, like, it's like, hey, I need you to learn some field care or some other things like extended field care. And those are the things we're worried about. Then we can get you there. But so I guess, like, you need a mixture of everything. Controllers, SR, PJs. The TACP thing is an interesting part of this, because they're supposed to start going through the assessment selection portion of things. So again, I don't have a problem with that. Like, if that works and they can produce the numbers that they need to produce, which the reality of that is not quite true. It's just not going to happen. Imagine you don't have a selection. Selections generally yield 80% washout rate. They're kind of experiencing that, I think, going through that for the first time. So again, growing pains with any major change like that. So having all the suite of options on a team, I think, is important. And so, if you wanted to come in and be the legacy, I'm a combat controller that goes and does JTAC things downrange. That's still a thing. We do have people doing that a little bit right now. I'm not gonna lie to you and say it's not happening and that it's completely dead. It's not. And there are places you can do that. But the majority of where the squadron is focused now, operational squadron, just to develop these team capabilities and go do these things for the theater special operations commands that need us to find ways to solve problems, because not everyone's got it figured out. And it's such a big problem right now, especially in Indo-PACOM and EUCOM, that it's just it can't be done by one branch. And so, when you come at things from a different perspective, you come up with unique solutions and ideas and novel ideas. And that's really what matters to commanders now, more than, I think, there is always going to be a bit of that, like, you're an Army guy or you're a Navy guy. There's always that kind of, parochialism. But for the most part, I think the good commanders out there are going to recognize, like, hey, good talent and good teams are going to get me solutions that I can actualize. And they're getting after my priorities. And that's ultimately what the nation needs. So that's, I think, what's important of what we're doing and what we're providing. And so that blend of everything is important, because that just gives everyone from different experiences that came in for different reasons and with different talents to think of, like, hey, how would I solve this? And I think that's helpful. So.
Yeah, I can get on board with that, sir. You did say one thing in there that I don't know if that was intentional or unintentional, because I don't know if that's ready for prime time yet. But you had mentioned TACP starting to do ANS kind of things.
I don't know if that's ready for prime time. That's a good question.
Yes.
But
what did we say about not putting him in a bad spot, Peaches?
Hey, that's on me. I just put
I was going to say that's on you, and I was like, oh, okay, cool.
It's trying to keep everything in your mind and straight.
Trent
honestly,
oh man,
I don't know if that is a go no go thing yet, on terms of, like, is that really happening? I just know that that's in the conversation, right? And so,
okay,
that came out of the RAND study, right? That is open source.
Yeah,
that was one of the recommendations. So I don't think that's a surprise to anybody that was a recommendation.
Well,
whether or not that's going live is a different.
Yeah, I don't know if
situation.
It's live. To be fair to everyone out there, I don't know if TACP is going through selection yet. I just know that is the conversation, because for it to be a soft force, one of the things is you have to go through assessment and selection of sorts, right? And so if you want this aspect war thing to happen and have these team capabilities, everyone's going to have to go through this experience. We've done that in the back end, where we put TACPs through at a selection later in their careers. We get about the same results in terms of, like, selection rates. So it's really kind of funny to me. Like, you always end up in the same place, no matter how many times we've investigated this or look at it. 80% is a safe number to say you're going to lose that amount of people through a selection process. I think that's what we want, right? That's in the soft core truths. But that's a whole tangent I could go off on. But yeah, so I don't know if it's live. I did throw that out there, but it is in the conversations, and so I think I'll be okay on that one. But
Well, one thing real quick too, and you mentioned it earlier, you talked about, trying to gain a consensus and trying to involve everybody in the process. And then, Trent just sort of brought it up. So I'm going to give a public service announcement to the bros that are listening out there, that when you hear these things, you're like, oh, what the heck? Guys, all this information already exists. The fact that you're not privy to that information, or you haven't done the work of going to do it, go read the stuff, go read the pad, go read the 2040 vision, go read the RAND study. Like, if you read these things when they come out and they're all on your email, like, I know that you all hate email and you guys don't want to be, if you involve yourself in the process, this stuff isn't so much of a surprise, because then you can start like connecting the dots of like, here's what the career field's thinking, here's what the big Air Force is thinking, here's what our training enterprise is thinking. And then you can avoid the emotional response of getting mad at Colonel Walsh by saying, oh, you're changing everything. No, he's not. he's actually just doing what's already out there in open source. You just haven't read it. So just do me a favor, guys. Just read it. Be a professional at your craft and stop throwing spears at a guy that's trying to fix the problem. Go ahead, Pete. Sorry.
Yeah, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, a lot of the stuff is out there. I'm not at the nexus of all the decision making. I don't sit at half and talk to these conversations. But yeah, there's a lot of info out there. A lot of it is still very much in the planning phases. Like, there are signed pads and there are things that are been said and directed to change. When things go through that process, it just takes time and people get a chance to hack on it. So I know, I'm going to the AFSOC staff next, so I have hopefully a bit more influence on this stuff. And I'm excited about that. I didn't value staff work, but I kind of now see, okay, there's importance.
There's value in it.
So you gotta lean into it and do a good job. But I know that AFSOC has had their hack on it and has tried to, influence it, right? So sometimes you just like can't control where things are going, and like we could be upset about it. Sure, I guess this is a general public service announcement on life things, but you could be upset about things you can't control, and you can let it drive all your stuff and make you mad. Or, like you're saying, is you can lean in and try to influence it and give it the best outcome that it can, and then own it, right? I had a very seasoned master sergeant combat controller say, if you can't get out of it, get into it, right? And so that's always like, I've had to tell myself that at times where I've been upset about this. Even at a commander level, like, trust me, I've had closed doors with some of the people that are in my circle of trust. And be like, hey, this is kind of BS and I'm not happy about what's going on, but I can't stop it from happening, right? So I have to say, how do I lean in and make it the best I can and take care of the things that I have control of, which is what's between my ears and then what's in my sphere of influence and control. So I'd argue that we struggle with that maybe nationwide right now, but that's something that I think that'll help you live your life in a happy manner and in your career in the Air Force. And there will be a time and place where you're going to get a chance. I'm sitting there now, in some degrees, where you may have an opportunity to make an impact that is hopefully positive, right? If you don't do anything, nothing will change. So, but you only get there by being willing to continue to like fight and influence and continue to push and try to make things better in the area that you're at. So, sorry, that's a bit of maybe big bluism, but I think it's just general life stuff that people need to do. So.
Yeah, well, it'd be good for everybody to take a breath and pause real quick before diving in and getting emotional about stuff. So speaking of your sphere of influence and control, you guys have recently made changes to kind of your big course that you guys hold at STTS. And I know you said we weren't going to do slides and it's fine. So kind of, give us like, what is the new kind of not pipeline, but the new course now? What does it look like? How long is it? What can they expect?
Yeah, that's good. So again, back to where we were earlier in the episode. So the next evolution of what we did with our course, moving it to 6 months, also opened the door to say, hey, one thing we've seen on the operational side is the teams are struggling as they do their standard evaluations, and they're now CV2ing teams before they go down range. So they're validating teams to say, hey, you meet all the standards we expect you to meet before you go deploy. That's not something we necessarily did before. We did that for JTACs, and we did that we didn't like say, hey, is an AZRT team ready to go do things? Like we've never really gone through that process. Always, I didn't do this. And so I think that's a healthy thing. And that's something that SOCOM expects from their forces. So big positive change in my head of like, hey, we have a standard now, we know what it is, and we're holding people to it, and they have to retrain. I've talked to the 2-3 commander about things that they've dealt with, and they're like, yeah, they're going to have to redo certain stuff. So it's not a pencil whipped deal. So I think that's important. So when the 720th is looking at all their tactical forces, they said, okay, there's the things we're struggling with. One of the reasons we're struggling with that is because we're not standardized on how we train through our 2-year short cycle or readiness cycle. And so we need to do that. And how do we do that? And one of the answers was like, well, hey, STTS does understand training and their instructors do understand how to do this. And we would like them to augment these short cycles for our squadrons to make sure that they're touching certain blocks of training. So there's the 720th has been more directive on there are certain phases of that 2-year cycle that they will do certain things so that the teams have all touched these skills before they get validated. I think that's a win. I do think that's good. There's some goodness in that. And it also gives you some like, hey, I know what I'm preparing for and I know what my training cycle needs to look like ahead of time. So it takes a little bit of the guesswork out of any of us that are in this room that how they've done a training cycle with their team has been like, I don't know, what do you want to do this next year? It's all over the place sometimes. And each team leader, it changes, and each NCO, senior NCO or SEL, it changes. So there provides some stability there.
Yeah.
With us doing that. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna echo what you did. Like I was one of the first teams at CV2 before we deployed. Like I was in the first iteration of figuring out how this is, and there was a bunch of resistance to it for a lot of good reasons. Not necessarily on the PJ side of the house. The Maroon hatted dudes are like, oh no, this is Stanival. This is what we've done this because the Flyers have a very well established and evolved evaluation process and stuff. And when we started getting that in, trying to explain it to my guys, I'm like, guys, like, I get it. They're like, oh, this guy's just going to sign this piece of paper saying we're going to deploy. That doesn't make any sense. Like, guys, that's not the point. This is how we all get better. You're establishing a framework. So now you really can go, hey, our team is good. Somebody with fresh eyes came in. We had people from other 2 series units that came in and took us all the way through the CV2, all the way through skill sets. I learned that was probably my biggest learning curve being, back in ST. I'd looked at stuff. I was like, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing. Getting my debrief as a team leader on a global access team, that made everybody better. Like that's what people don't understand about the CV2 and the evaluation process and standardization. Of course, we all resist it. Every special operator in the world is going to resist standardization because we want to, hey, I know what's best for the team. I made the training cycle. We don't need to be doing this other stuff. I want to focus on this. But you're right. It's personality dependent. It's dependent upon who's running the specific unit, down to the specific team, sometimes down to the specific section in the STTs of what they value and what they think is important. So I hope that people are hearing what you're saying and going, oh, okay, this is just another challenge that we can rise to. We say it all the time. You're never, ever done training. You're never done being evaluated. The pipeline is not the last time that somebody's going to look at you and go, hey, that wasn't your best run today. And, to have entire teams hear that before they go deploy, be like, this is what we need you to do to like keep AFSOC relevant, to keep ST relevant and in the space. You have to have those things that are underlaid. So I know people hear the CV2 thing, and I know there's emotional responses for everybody that knows what, certification, validation, verification is doing. But man, I was always here for it, so to speak. So I'm glad to hear that you guys are continuing to do that and putting it down to your level. Like that's important.
Yeah. And if you think of it from a couple levels up, right? One of the things that is like, hey, they're expecting commanders at the squadrons to be able to say, hey, my forces are ready to deploy and meet these tasks. That builds trust with the commanders above us, which builds trust with the commanders above them. When you develop trust at the GO level that your forces have met this standard, that opens up mission space, right? And that's the thing. I think it's hard to realize that because it really isn't fun to talk about. And it's I get it, man. I don't find it fun to talk about at times either, but I recognize its importance. And so as we say, hey, we want our teams to do these things. And then there is a future fight where we want our teams to be the choice to maybe go into combat. SOCOM has to look at us in that way and say, hey, these guys are meeting the standards that our GVs meet and that our SEALs meet. I like to use the GVs as the standard because I'm more familiar with them and how they do this. But that part of it, I think, is the biggest win in all of this, right? And it creates consistency. And so there's a lot of value there. But back to where I was. So the CV2 thing, they kind of identified all these shortfalls, and they asked STTS to lean in and say, help us make the POIs that we want to get validated by SOCOM. That says, hey, you are meeting the soft BIS standards, or the basic interoperability standards that we have. You're hitting these critical task listings of these things that you need to do. So we said, okay, we can help with that. That does, though, mean that I probably can't run a 6-month course on top of it. So that made us kind of, roll back our course to right now. We're looking at a 3-month TDY, which is nice, I guess, when you think about like time off, head off pillow. But we're really just like hyper focusing on your AFSC skills, and that's it. So you're going to come here and learn those things, and maybe communications and a couple other things that are a bit more difficult for squadrons to train on a bigger scale because we have a lot more equipment. But that's the game plan right now. We'll run that kind of, the goal is twice a year, align it with the JORT. So kind of everything flows. All of the pieces of the machine ideally are in sync with each other, which hasn't really been a thing I'd argue in a long time. And so, if ever. And so I think there's some value there. Will it be perfect? Will the first MTT mission mobile training team that we're sending out to do this, is it going to go great? Probably not perfect. And okay, I'm
First iteration is always a little. There's always some growing pains. It's a little rough.
Dude, and that's okay, man. Like, I'm not like, we'll take the feedback, we'll adjust, and we'll fix it. Right? If we just assume it's going to be the worst thing that's ever happened, it will be the worst. We will guarantee that.
It's just stupid. And what are we doing this for?
Just set those expectations a little bit lower, everybody. Listen, we're gonna get out there, we're gonna see what works, and then we're gonna go ahead and adjust and make some halftime adjustments and come out strong.
Correct. And like, again, it's not us versus them. Like, we're literally all on the same team. Like, these guys that are instructing at the squadron are gonna go back to the teams at some point. And so we're trying to create instructors here that leave the team that are actual experts in the field of things that they're instructing while they're here. And so I think that's good, because it's like, if, we're not going to be like a weapons school per se, but the value of getting a patch out of the weapons school into the squadron is like all this amazing experience and knowledge on things. STTS should be that same thing. Like, you go to the schoolhouse, you come out of the schoolhouse and be like, hey, that's our guy, right? He knows a lot about whatever it is he was teaching. And so that's where we're trying to professionalize internally. Like, the STTS doesn't do everything perfect. I acknowledge that. And so we've got to grow through this process as well, but it also gives you something a bit to sink your teeth into as an instructor. Is like, hey, I want you to be an expert, and I want to lean in and invest in your skills, and send you to courses and make sure you become this person, and you get to write the POIs, and you get to kind of determine the way we train our community. And I think that's pretty cool. And I want a bit of that control. And so that's what's coming with it. But long and the short of it, we're going to do these MTTs, mobile training teams, to support aspects of this block training that 720th has directed the line units to do. And then we'll also have the 3-level course, 5-level mini course that we'll have in there. On top of that, we do have some employment courses. So we're digging into having, some closed circuit capability at the squadron so people can train it. There's a place to go to do this. Turns out Florida's a great place to dive, so it makes a lot of sense to do it here. And so there's just other things that we will have off-the-shelf solutions for, that if the force says, hey, all of a sudden everyone needs to go do X, Y, or Z downrange, it's like STTS has kind of maintained some connective tissue with that skill. It doesn't just atrophy forever. And then we're like, oh, in chaos, we're trying to create something, which is, again, not the way we do things in SOF. And so we're trying to just kind of find ways to kind of get back to the basics, I'd say, is really what a lot of this is. And now that we have time to do it.
Well, and that's kind of the beauty of where you guys sit in terms of the command relationship and stuff like that, is because you're not air education and training command, which is a massive ship to try and steer and that kind of stuff. And there's so many different levels of approval. Since you guys fall under the 24 Sal / 720th Special Tactics Group, like, your ability to rapidly change is a good thing in my eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the challenge. Like, there are good people in AATC. I won't knock it, but the organization, in some ways, people don't like bureaucracy, and I get it, but in some ways it has a benefit, right? And one of the benefits is it does avoid massive change happening on a large scale too quickly, right? Because we do get change fatigue. Things get out of line pretty fast. It's painful. but they're it's probably the only benefit I can think of, but it works in that way. It can slow things down, and sometimes things being a bit slower is good. And so, but they're working through that, right? They're trying to figure out how do we optimize the 3-level pipeline. I'm not in those conversations, but I know that the training enterprise writ large is like, I don't know if that was on us that created the ripple effect. Hopefully people are looking at it, but the training enterprise at large is trying to figure out how do we do this better and smarter. And they're figuring out how to improve ANS, how to streamline things as much as possible without losing the quality. So it's good. I think any business, any organization that's trying to stay relevant, trying to grow and be better, should go back and reevaluate the things that it's done for, more than probably 10 years and say, is this what we should be doing? And is it the right way in today's environment? And if you do that and you continue to kind of iterate on that, like you continue to move forward. And I think that's good. You watch businesses, because I like to do a lot of correlation with the corporate world, because I think it's important. They're pretty smart, right? And you have to make money. Like you got to stay on top of this. Like you don't just get a check every year and it's like, hey, it doesn't really matter what you do. Like we need you to stay here. And so their survival is imperative. And you watch companies that don't, evolve with things, and you watch them die off, right? And we read about it in the news and the headlines. And so I wouldn't, the military isn't immune to that necessarily. It just doesn't, it's not as like obvious when something just kind of dies off. You just kind of dissolve into irrelevancy, and then you get less budget, you get less people, and then kind of you're just there. And then hopefully you can kind of find your way back in when the next conflict happens. And so, that's, we're trying to not do that, I think is really the nexus of a lot of this.
Well, I think there's some goodness on the ATC side about having that foundation be less flexible, right? Like the things that we've always been, the people that we've always produced, making sure that those processes, like you said, are more difficult to change. But it makes a lot more sense when they get on the other side of the fence, where you guys, you're enabling your younger folks to get after all these new things that they're getting after because they're young and motivated. Like I know some of the instructors down there. To really get after it, and to allow them to be the subject matter enthusiasts and pass that on to the next generation of folks, right? Because you want that foundation to come through and to be the same as it ever was, because historically that's been very solid for us. But then the rest of it, like that's been one of our problems, right? Like you saw the problem, and one of the problems is we're not moving at the same pace as the problem sets. We kind of like got stuck in our GWOT, STTS phase. And I think you're just trying to move that forward. So I think there's a lot of positivity there to have that kind of flexibility to meet those soft BIS standards, which we didn't necessarily recognize for a long time. And then to also, maintain the pace with whatever is coming our way, to be flexible is going to be huge for us. Yeah. That wasn't really a question. That was just a statement that I expect you to riff off of, I guess.
No, you're right. I listened to, I just drove like all the way across the country to get a puppy with my daughters the other day. Actually, last night we just got back. It was like a 24-hour.
That's awesome.
Back and forth. It was awesome.
Bless your heart. Get
it. So, anyways, through that process, I listened to a number of podcasts. One of them was more on the financial freedom side of things, but it's this conversation of like, hey, we've talked about soft BIS, we've talked about these things. And then their contexts are like, hey, you read the books on how to be financially free, or you listen to the podcast. Well, that's all great until you actually do something. And so the thing here is like, hey, we've talked about all these things. We've all recognized it. Like, we're going to do something. It may not be perfect. And so I think that's important. And we're giving the instructors, I've tried to say, hey, the guys we've got in the squadron on the SR and CCT side are very talented. You guys know how to solve these problems. You've got the ground truth. You solve the problems. Like, I will go advocate for those solutions and try to drive it so you have that freedom of maneuver. That's how the system is meant to work, I think. That comes from some of my favorite leadership books. It's like, hey, you gotta trust that. And then there's also one of my favorite things is like, don't get treated by a chihuahua, right? Like, there's this threat that if we do this thing, like everyone's waiting to steal all our stuff, or they're waiting to push ST into irrelevancy. And I was like, we don't know that that's true. And that is something I think we've created this invisible monster out there that we're worried about coming to get us. And I don't think it exists. And so I was like, hey, we can't be stressed about something we don't know that's a real threat. And so we had to move forward. And so, I think hopefully that continues to catch on. I think the community is kind of geared that way. I mean, one of the things that the whole pipeline is designed to do is to make it to where you graduate and there's not a problem that you can't overcome. I think that's like the biggest thing we get out of you is like, hey, you feel like you can tackle anything, right? And that's what we want. So, and we're trying to now hopefully show that on an organizational level is like, hey, we can get after it and solve problems, and we can change in a good way. Hopefully not too much change fatigue. I try to avoid that, but things, you can't control everything. So again, take it in stride, and we'll move forward. And hopefully we have another podcast in a year from now. I won't be sitting in the command. You can talk to the next guy, and things are going great. Or you can.
We'll just bring you on to talk smack about your replacement.
Yeah.
We'll bring you on. You can be like that new guy that took over.
Commander. Jeez.
Woo!
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at that point, you can.
That's the way it works, right?
It is.
I do want to ask. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I just want to say, like, that's one of the challenges of this, right? Is you don't get 10 years to change this. Like, some of these problems are 10-year problems. Some of them really do take iteration. Like, when you change a course, it takes like a year to see the output. So sometimes you don't know, like, you pull too many levers at once. We've seen this a million times over in all of our courses. You don't have the time and space to really see things through on a long timeline, and you have to make these small incremental changes. So, I hope people understand the complexity of that. Go ahead, Trent.
No, that's true. And you guys kind of get stuck cleaning up the mess, right? Because if you get that feedback from CV2 and all those other things almost immediately where you're at, you get to see where you can plug and play immediately to fix those problems. So in a lot of ways, you're in a pretty good position to fix problems that maybe weren't necessarily, your fault. But I do want to ask, we talk about SOFBIS a lot. We talk about SOCOM a lot. Where do we sit? What do we own within that realm that keeps us relevant, where we're going to push, the rest of the SOCOM community writ large to maintain some of the standards that the Air Force owns? Are you tracking any of that?
Are you saying like what are the things that like makes ST specific, like value proposition things? Is that what you're trying to get at? Or
like, so different people own different parts of the SOFBIS, right? And all that other stuff. Like, where does the Air Force come into that, and how do we make sure that we are that value proposition to solve Air Force problems within the SOCOM construct, moving forward, and make sure that we are the experts in the stuff that we're really supposed to be the experts on for all of the Air Force, SOCOM, all these other folks, and we can push those standards.
Yeah. So programmatically, like what AFSOC owns, I guess, on the SOCOM, based on my understanding, and I'm probably not as smart on this as I probably should be, but like you've got the JTAC thing, that is the portfolio owner, I suppose, is a way to say it. It would be the Air Force right now. That's probably a whole nother podcast about what that looks like in the future and everything as well. But that's what the expectation is now. So right now we've got that kind of as the thing that AFSOC owns on behalf of SOCOM, and like we run that schoolhouse that's under SCTS for Special Operations Terminal Track Control course. That is still under our umbrella, and so that schoolhouse is obviously trying to evolve as well, and put curriculum in there that's relevant to the future JTAC fight. So that's a whole nother conversation. Like, what does the future JTAC look like? We won't dig into that. Most of it's classified anyway. So, but other than that, I mean, great question. Probably something that we need to lean into more, in my opinion, to really put our stamp on. So I think that there's places like UAS may be a place, distributed C2 may be a place that we can say, hey, this is how we're going to do contested communications, or this is how we're going to do UAS in the future and how it can look. And here's a suite of options. I mean, FPV drones, there's all these things that we're not at a policy perspective or at a AFI or directives or any of those instructions, like they're not on pace with the way battlefield's changing. And so we've got to figure out how to overcome that, right? And how do we get there, and who manages that stuff? So I think there's a space right there that off the top of my head, I probably should know. I don't think anyone owns that. I think it's kind of everyone's trying to figure out who is in charge of this. And no one wants to touch it because it's so complex and difficult. And so
I think that was just my attempt to do a call to action for the Air Force folks. Like, hey, like, let's stop like pretending like we need to meet the SOFBIS standards that other services have put forward, and we need to be the ones driving the train in a lot of ways, and the things that we are really good at. And we're we got the talent. We're really good at a lot of these things. I think we can make big strides in a lot of these areas that you brought up. And I think that's, to me, if we're going to go towards the team model and not just the enabler model, then we need to adopt that mentality that we're going to be driving the train. and not just kind of doing what SOCOM or the other services through the SOFBIS tell us to do. So that's just me trying to make people do what I want them to do.
No,
Yeah, well,
that's valid.
and the treed by a Chihuahua thing is great. Like I think you're dead on, sir. Like we created this monster that doesn't exist. Well, the answer to that is do the SOFBIS stuff. Go back to SOCOM and go, no. We do everything it is that you do, but look at all of these very specific and very valuable things that we do. That's how you protect your mission space. And people kind of have that backwards. For so long we resisted SOCOM and the SOFBIS standards and all this other stuff because we're like, yeah, we do that. And it was a non-starter for SOCOM. That's why we started all of these programs from CV2 to aligning with our sister service counterparts. That actually gives you the freedom of movement. People can't seem to wrap their head around that. It tends to be frustrating.
Yeah. And I can give you some real world examples of this to a point. I'm going to talk around like the specifics, but there have been general officers that have asked questions when teams were in theaters and said, hey, how is this team CV2'd? Before, we wouldn't have an answer to that. We'd actually like, well, now it's like the commander that was downrange at the time, who was the 2-2 commander, had a very good answer to be able to give back to SOCOM commander. Say, hey, here, and it was just really an off. You know how 4 stars and 3 stars, they ask a question that could just be very much a like general question, like they're not trying to dig into it. It turns into a big thing, but yeah, it's a valid question. And so he asked it and he got the response back and it's like, okay. And that was the end of the conversation. And so I think that's like, hey, look at we are doing everything we're supposed to do, to your point, that meets what your expectations are. And that puts us on the same field as everybody else. And so there isn't this like, hey, I don't want us to be Green Berets. I don't want us to be SEALs. Like I want us to be special tactics and do what the Air Force does. But I also want to be given the same credibility and the same, kudos and bona fides that those teams have. And so, but we can't expect that and then never do those things just because like, hey, we have great operators and we do, right? Arguably person for person, some of the best in the world. I 100% agree with that. But that doesn't mean a whole lot to a general officer trying to field a team of guys. And so this is where we're putting on our grown-up pants. We've got to the point where, we got to put on our tie and take our suitcase. We got to go to work like everybody else and say, hey,
oh man,
I know it's painful, right? But it's a mature view of like, hey, this is where we are. We know we're talented. Now let's just put all the administrative stuff in place that needs to be in place to validate that. And I think we haven't quite seen the returns, but I know the teams are doing things downrange that Army and Navy teams aren't doing, and they're coming up with solutions, and it's pretty cool. Like it's starting to really actualize itself, right? And so I think that's good, and we'll see that start to play out over the next years. It may not even really happen in my career, but the goal is like I had, if you guys know Kurt Buller, I had a conversation with him once upon a time. Because I was upset with my deployment time, right? Like I didn't get to go do the thing. I didn't get to go have all the combat experience and be a JTAC, even though I went to SOTAC. And there's these things I expected to have happen. And I was thinking about getting out at the time. And he said to me, he's like, yeah, man, that sucks. And I'm sorry that didn't happen for you. But what can you do now? And I was like, he's like, all you can do now is make it better for the next guy. Like that's the only control you have at this point. That stuff's probably behind you. And so I remind myself of that all the time. And so I try to tell that to guys. It's like, yeah, it may not have been what you wanted it to be. And I'm sorry. I felt that same way. But we can make it better for the next guy. And so that's kind of that's the thing I've tried to like continue to remind myself when I get frustrated with this stuff. So
dang it, Kurt, don't make this positive. Stop it.
Right?
Stop
How
being
dare
Kurt
you?
Buller. Don't make me feel challenged to be a better version of myself every single day. You giant. Yeah.
He's like the dwarf version of Goggins and Jocko.
Yeah. Nice. Well, you kind of mentioned it earlier, but it's a great point. You were talking about listening to your financial freedom, podcast on your road trip, but that's exactly what you're doing here. You have to invest first, and then you get the dividends from the investment down the road. And that's exactly what you're doing. And throughout this entire thing, sir, for all of the, the strategic frustrations or, the inputs from the team that can be frustrating at some point, it's obvious, number one, that you care, and number two, that you're excited about where we're going. So, to kind of to wrap these things up, where are you excited about seeing the career field go? What makes you continue to be willing to take these spears and to put your name and sign it on the, when you start putting your signature block on large items that really do change the course? And it's a big ship. It takes a long time to turn, but the couple degrees that you have changed the tack of where we're going, what continues to make you excited about where we're going as an Air Force and specifically about spec war?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I told this in my squadron the other day when we did our commander's call. It's like, I didn't expect this to be my favorite job in the military, but it absolutely has been. And the reason is because the people I get to work with, and that's why it matters, right? The folks that are going to come in and do the job, it's for them, right? Above that, the nation needs us to get our shit together and make sure that we know what we're doing. And if that next war happens, we're ready for it. I believe in that wholeheartedly. Anyone that has gone through the GWOT-era understands how important that is. We are getting a little detached from that. So I think that is always going to be at the forefront. But I have to set up the next generation of folks, so they're going to want to continue to do this, and then they're going to want to improve it. And that's what matters to me. And seeing the young guys come in, that's one cool thing about the schoolhouse is you get to see the young guys come in, and they're eager. I mean, they're talented. They're eager to get stuff done. It's not their fault. Like, we always get in this, like, they're not as strong as they used to be. Like, yeah, maybe that may be true.
Okay, but you did it.
But
these guys aren't great. Well, then you did it. I know who to blame, and it's the generation
exactly.
before.
So like we gotta if that's a call to action for us in and of itself. And so, but they're eager and they want to do well. And so I think that is the part that is like, hey, well, I've got to give you a place where you can go out and use your talents. And so that's the idea right now. Is that's what keeps me motivated. Is there is hope. It's not all bad. There's bad things. Yeah, there are days where I'm frustrated too. But I think this is a natural cycle of the world and the U.S. and a lot of other places. So, you just got to kind of lean into what you can do. Like we said, control what we can control and make it better as the best we can. And I think that will have its ripple effects out beyond, we may not even realize what's happening, but at a minimum, taking care of the folks and making sure they have the mission and they have the ability to go do stuff and are excited and motivated to come to work, that pays all the dividends because they're going to come up with the new solution of something I've not even thought of because I'm not smart enough to think of it yet, or it's just it's not in my life experience. So
Yeah, for sure. I think the way as you navigate the space, you recognize gaps in the market and you fill those holes, whatever it's going to be. So, sir, really appreciate you joining us. Thanks for coming on for a second time. More importantly, thanks for leading at STTS. We still talk to a lot of the dudes that are there, instructors, and we always hear great things about you. So, which is awesome because you never like to hear bad things. But like the dudes love you. So I'll take that all day long. So thanks for doing what you're doing.
Yeah, good work,
not
sir.
just the instructors, but also the I don't want to say students, but I mean, what students at STTS? I don't know. They're not cones, so
no, yeah,
whatever.
Students.
Yeah.
You call them whatever you want. They're not
call
humans.
them whatever.
Call them whatever. They're not real people.
So
kidding.
but
Kidding.
thanks for doing that. Thanks for coming on. Congrats on your 3rd year of command, and keep killing it, especially up at AFSOC headquarters. So everybody out there, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and leave us a review if you feel so inclined. And we're happy you joined us. Later.
All right, appreciate it.
Thanks, sir.